During the interviewer is typically in control of 4 separate functions. The technical aspects, that's things like, microphones, recording, things like that. And we're going to talk about that in a later section. The aims of the interview must be kept in mind. Are we trying to cover certain topics? Have I got certain questions that I must ask? Things like that. Supplementary questions, which is formulating questions on the fly based on what the interviewee is saying. And time management. If you only have 10 minutes with somebody, make sure you use that. Equally, if you're trying to produce a podcast that's going to be 30 minutes in length, don't go record 3 hours with somebody, because it's going to be you're going to have a lot of work trying to edit all of that down to fit in the time. So often you can have like a clock. There might be a clock if you're recording in the studio. There might be a clock in the studio. Or I know I said don't be looking at your phone, but you could just bring up a timer on your phone, or you might have a watch, something like that. Just as a way of keeping track of time. When you're conducting an interview, it's a good idea to kind of wind up the interview. You can signpost this by saying finally, which is indicating that this is your last question. Use it only once. Don't say finally, and then finally, and then finally. Sometimes you might want to summarize the main points of what the interview was. Now that could be something like, again, if you were talking to somebody about a book, when the book is available, the title of the book, something like that. When I used to interview musicians, they often might have a gig coming up, so I might just mention the gig, where it is, tickets are on sale, blah, 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 blah. If you're talking to somebody about politics, you maybe don't need to summarize their party political points, or maybe not, I don't know. Probably not. One thing that you want to do is thank the interviewee on mic. You always want to thank somebody for their time. Typically they're doing this for free. They're not being paid for it. They're giving their time to you, so you should be respectful of that, and you should thank them on air, on mic. That's not just for you. It's not just for the interviewee, but it's also for the listener, because it shows that you, as the interviewer, are courteous and kind and respectful and polite. When the interview is over, thank the person again. Thank them for their time, because you may want to interview them again. And if you're rude, they're probably not going to come back to you. You might want to check the sound, to check the things have been recorded okay. If you're going to do that, just check the start of it, maybe check the end of it. Don't play the interview for the interviewee, particularly if there's somebody who's not used to being interviewed, because they're probably not going to like the sound of their own voice. We, as in people, don't sound the way that we think we sound. If you've ever heard yourself on a video or an audio recording of yourself, you don't sound the way you think you sound. And people become very self-conscious about that. It's not that they sound wrong or bad or anything like that. It's just they sound unexpected. Most people don't like the sound of their own voice. And the other thing you should do is tell the interviewee when the piece is likely to be published. So if you're recording a podcast interview, say, and that'll be released next Monday at 9:00, and I'll send you a link as soon as it's available, or whatever that. So to summarize this section, the aim of an interview is to tell a story on a particular topic. The interviewee's or the interviewer's job, it's quite simple. Prepare well, ask good questions, and listen to what's being said. Good preparation will help you form good questions. And you want to bear in mind all those building blocks of interview technique that we talked about open questions, closed questions, and also the width of question. And time management is a key skill in all of this. Now, there's a few random observations that I have made as a result of my years of interviewing various different people. The first thing is, be very, very careful if you're interviewing minors. This is people under the age of 18. If you may have to get consent from an adult. If it's for a college project or an academic project, you may have to get ethical approval. So you just want to be very, very careful about that. If somebody doesn't want to talk to you, you can't force them. So you can't badger somebody into an interview. Okay, so don't do that. If you are discussing sensitive topics, something health related or something about somebody's personal life, you need to tread very, very carefully. Okay, you need to be sensitive and be very mindful of those things. Inexperienced interviewees can go mute as soon as you press record because maybe they just get a little bit nervous. So a good way to get them to open up is to just ask them kind of silly questions. That'll help them relax into things. So one thing that I often do is I ask, small talk type questions about, who's your favorite soccer team? Or when I'm checking mics, I'll often ask somebody to, what did they have for breakfast? And get them to describe their breakfast in detail. It's a silly question. They probably won't have to think about it. And it will allow them to kind of relax and loosen up by talking about something as banal as their breakfast. Listen to what your interviewee is saying. I really hate it when I'm listening to a podcast or an interview on the radio and the interviewer clearly isn't listening to what somebody is saying. It comes across as rude, but also they might be leaving gold on the table. If somebody says something interesting, put on that thread. Don't interrupt people. If somebody's answering a question, don't interrupt them because you're going to have two voices going against each other and it can be very difficult to listen to. It can also ruin the audio. If you want to interject to kind of let somebody know that you're listening, you can go with a or a mm-hmm. If you want to convey to the interviewee that you're listening. But obviously you don't want to do too much. Also, you can nod away. It's a podcast, so it's likely somebody can't see you. You might think you just look like a nodding dog, but nobody can see you, so it's okay. And be polite, be sound. A really simple thing. This is something that I learned a long, long time ago. Is that like if you have somebody coming in for an interview, particularly an in-person interview, offer to buy them a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or get them a glass of water or whatever it might be. It doesn't sound like very, very much, but it's just courtesy, and that goes a long way. So the more interviews you do, the better you'll become. There's a bit of a dark art to it, and it is something definitely that rewards experience. Sometimes interviews can just go bad for you, and other times things will just go your way. The best advice I can say to you, though, is to listen to other interviews. But instead of focusing on what the interviewee is saying, focus on how the interviewer goes about their work. You'll often find that the best interviewers, they say very little. They ask good questions and then they get out of the way and let the interviewee just go. There's a couple of references, and we will talk to you again soon.